My parents stole my credit card and went on a $19,000 shopping spree for my sister. My mom mocked me, saying, "You never look good in these brands anyway." I replied, "Neither will you in court." Minutes passed, I got a call from the store manager. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to consider pressing charges against my own parents. But after they stole my credit card while I was recovering from oral surgery and racked up nearly $20,000 on designer clothes and handbags for my sister, then mocked me when I found out, I realized that blood doesn't entitle anyone to use you. I'm still sorting through the fallout, and I could really use some advice on how to move forward. I don't come from a wealthy family. I've worked my way up from the bottom: scholarships, side gigs, sleepless nights in my 20s trying to balance coursework and 2 part-time jobs. At 34, I have a stable job as a CPA in Richmond, Virginia, and I live a pretty modest, quiet life. No kids, no spouse, not even a dog, just me and my small apartment filled with carefully curated peace. I built that peace. Every inch of it. And somehow, it still wasn't enough to keep the chaos of my family out. I have a younger sister, Savannah, who's 29. Growing up, we were complete opposites. She was bubbly, charismatic, the life of the party. I was quiet, organized, and obsessed with earning approval I'd never get. Our parents, Paul and Darlene, made no secret of the fact that Savannah was their favorite. She got the compliments, the nicer clothes, the support when she dropped out of school to focus on her brand. I got lectures about budgeting and acting like a lady. It didn't hurt as much as it used to. I had long since accepted my role in the family as the responsible one, the unfun daughter who could be counted on to pick up the pieces but never asked to be celebrated. What I didn't expect, what I couldn't wrap my head around, was how that dynamic would evolve into something that still takes my breath away when I think about it. 3 months ago, I had a minor surgery to remove impacted wisdom teeth. Nothing serious, but enough to leave me groggy and sleeping for most of the day. My parents dropped by my apartment the next afternoon with chicken soup and a condescending pep talk. I barely remember the visit. I think I fell asleep while they were still there. They said they'd lock the door on the way out. It wasn't until a week later that I noticed something was off. I was doing my usual Sunday budget review. I do this every week, religiously, and I saw a charge for $2,340 at Nordstrom. That alone would have raised alarms, but it wasn't alone. There were charges at Saks Fifth Avenue, Bloomingdale's, Neiman Marcus, a few smaller ones from Sephora and Coach. It totaled just under $19,200. All within a 5-day period. My stomach dropped. My first instinct was fraud. Some kind of identity theft. But when I looked closer, I saw that every single purchase had been made in person, right here in Richmond. At Short Pump Town Center. 20 minutes from my apartment. I tore through my office drawers looking for my credit cards. The primary one was in my wallet. The backup, a rarely used emergency card, was gone. Not missing, taken. The only people who had been in my apartment during that time were my parents. I didn't want to believe it. I truly didn't. But the pieces fit too perfectly. I called the credit card company and reported the charges as fraudulent. They said they'd launch an investigation, and they canceled the card. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept imagining my mother's hands rifling through my drawer, taking the card with the same calm she used to butter toast. The next morning, I drove to their house. My heart was pounding. I'd rehearsed a dozen versions of the conversation. When my dad opened the door and smiled like everything was fine, I knew I'd lose it if I didn't stay calm. I walked in and asked plainly, "Did one of you take my credit card?" My mom didn't even flinch. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, and Savannah was beside her unboxing what looked like a new pair of Louis Vuitton heels. My mother didn't look up. "We needed it for Savannah's interviews," she said, like she was explaining why they borrowed my stapler. I just stared at her. "You spent nearly $20,000. Stop being dramatic," she said. "You've got a good job. It's not like you can't afford it." Savannah chimed in with a half laugh, "You never wear anything nice anyway." And that's when my mother hit me with the line that would replay in my head for weeks, "You never look good in those brands anyway." She said it like she was commenting on the weather. Not a hint of shame. And something inside me snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just said, as calmly as I could manage, "Neither will you," in court. I turned and left. I didn't care what they said next. 10 minutes after I got home, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hi, this is Nathan from Saks Fifth Avenue. We had a woman in here this morning trying to return some of the merchandise purchased on your account, and our associate noticed the name on the card didn't match the ID she gave us. The manager flagged it, and we wanted to alert you in case of fraud." I thanked him. Told him I'd be in touch. And then I called the police. I didn't cry right away. I sat in my car, holding my phone, replaying the store manager's voice in my head. It felt like my body had gone cold from the inside out. Not only had they stolen from me, but they were already trying to cash out the loot. There was no shame, no hesitation. Just a scam, cleanly executed, like they'd done it before. And maybe they had. The next day I met Nathan at Saks. He was surprisingly kind, professional but not robotic. I appreciated that. He showed me security footage on a small screen in the back room. There she was, my mother, dressed in a tailored coat, carrying a tote bag that likely wasn't even paid for, trying to return thousands of dollars worth of clothes and accessories. She was holding my credit card. And when asked for ID, she handed over her own, not even trying to pretend the names matched. She didn't seem nervous at all, Nathan said. It just didn't sit right with our sales associate. I thanked him. I wasn't even sure what to say. I went home and called a lawyer. Her name was Celia Marston. A no-frills, quick-talking fraud attorney who'd handled similar cases before, usually financial torment of elderly clients by their kids, not the other way around. Still, she was calm and clear. "Do you want to pursue criminal charges?" she asked. "Or civil?" "I don't want to hurt them," I said automatically. She gave me a long, level look. "They already hurt you." That sat with me. The truth of it. The quiet finality. So I told her yes. I wanted to press charges. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I was done letting things slide in the name of family. The moment they were served, the calls started. First it was my dad. He left a message with a voice like steel wrapped in butter. "This is ridiculous. This is family. What's wrong with you?" Then came the texts. My mom must have sent 12 in the span of 2 hours. Some angry. Some pleading. Some trying to gaslight me into thinking I'd given them permission during my recovery. Savannah's message was the worst. "You're making a mountain out of nothing. It's not like you need the money. Why do you always act like a victim?" I stared at it for a long time. I thought about the years I'd spent working overtime to build credit, save for emergencies, pay down student loans while Savannah hopped between influencer dreams and family-funded getaways. I didn't reply. I blocked them all and forwarded everything to Celia. The legal process wasn't fast, and it wasn't clean. My parents' attorney tried to argue that this was a misunderstanding, that I had verbally approved the use of the card while medicated. Celia was ready for it. She brought the store footage. The police report. A written statement from Nathan and the Saks employee. She even subpoenaed the GPS metadata from the shopping trips, which showed the locations of every single purchase lined up perfectly with my parents' vehicle registration and cell phone data. They hadn't just borrowed the card. They'd planned a spree. They went from store to store, dressing Savannah like a doll for some future career she hadn't even decided on yet. They bought handbags that cost more than my rent. Silk blouses she'd never wear to a real job. Makeup sets she posted on Instagram as PR gifts. And they'd done it without an ounce of guilt. The most surreal part of all of this was how normal they tried to act during it all. Like it was a minor disagreement, a speed bump we'd laugh about one day at Thanksgiving. They didn't understand that something broke the moment they took that card and decided I'd never notice. Or worse, decided I would notice, and just wouldn't do anything about it. They didn't know me as well as they thought. I started therapy during all this. The therapist, Marjorie, helped me see something I hadn't realized in the fog of betrayal, that I'd spent my entire life waiting for my family to become the version I needed them to be. The kind that celebrated my achievements, respected my boundaries, saw me as more than a convenient fallback. Instead, I was the bank. The fixer. The invisible backbone. Even when I confronted them, they acted like it was me who was overreacting. That's when I stopped waiting for them to change. I began to prepare for court like I was preparing for an audit, meticulously, methodically, but this time for myself. I gathered every message. Every receipt. Every quiet detail that proved this wasn't an accident. This was a pattern. A family that had long since decided I was the responsible one, which, in their minds, meant I was also the expendable one. The one who'd forgive. Who'd pay. Who'd stay quiet. Not anymore. The day of the deposition, I sat in a small, neutral-toned conference room that smelled like printer paper and cheap coffee. Celia sat beside me with her quiet but intimidating energy. Across the table were my parents and their attorney, a man who looked like he hadn't slept properly in years and was already annoyed he had to be here. Paul and Darlene didn't look at me. They sat stiffly, dressed like they were going to Sunday brunch, not a legal proceeding over grand theft. My mother had her hair done. My father wore the same blazer he'd worn to my college graduation. I thought I might cry seeing them there, but I didn't. Instead, I felt something colder. Something firmer. A kind of emotional concrete setting in. They were strangers now. Familiar strangers. Like people you used to know well and now wouldn't trust with your mail. The deposition started. Celia was surgical. Calm and firm, never raising her voice, just dismantling every excuse and half-truth they tried to offer. So you admit you used your daughter's card? Paul's jaw tightened. We didn't think she'd mind. Did she ever give you explicit permission? There was silence. Then Darlene shrugged. She was on medication. She probably forgot. Celia didn't even blink. So to confirm, she was medicated, not lucid, and that's when you chose to access her personal belongings and take her card without her knowledge? Darlene started to say something, then stopped. It was one of the first times I'd ever seen my mother stumble. They tried to pivot, saying it was for Savannah, for her future, that I'd always had more stability. As if that justified it. As if 20 years of neglect and favoritism gave them the moral authority to steal from me. But none of it held up. They weren't apologetic. They weren't remorseful. They were just annoyed they were being held accountable. After the deposition, as we were packing up, Paul suddenly stood and said to me, not angrily, not with pride, but in a kind of bitter, tired voice, "You really think this is going to make you feel better?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. And I said, no. But at least now I can finally stop pretending like we're a family. He didn't reply. He just turned and walked out. The weeks that followed were strange. Quiet. Heavy. Freeing in some ways, suffocating in others. I didn't hear from Savannah again, except through passive-aggressive social media posts. One of them showed her wearing a pair of shoes I recognized from the Nordstrom receipt, captioned with, "Some people are just jealous of what they can't pull off." Classy. Friends and coworkers started noticing the change in me. I wasn't dramatic about it, I didn't vent to everyone or cry in the break room. But I became, harder, maybe. More distant. Less tolerant of boundary pushing. I stopped answering calls from extended relatives who just wanted to hear my side but really just wanted gossip. I was done explaining myself. The hardest part wasn't the legal stuff. It was the silence. The sudden absence of people who had occupied so much of my emotional bandwidth. Even if most of it was pain, it was familiar pain. Losing that weirdly felt like losing something I'd depended on, as toxic as it had been. I'd spent so much of my life trying to earn scraps of love from people who only valued me when they needed something. Now that I'd cut the cord, there was a void. A painful one. But it was mine. And in that void, something new began to form: space. Room for clarity. For peace. For people who respected boundaries and didn't make love conditional on obedience. The first time I had a panic attack after the deposition was in the middle of Costco. I was standing in the paper towel aisle, staring at two nearly identical 12-packs, when my vision started tunneling. I couldn't breathe. My heart raced so violently I thought I was about to drop dead between an end cap of Swiffer mops and discounted camping chairs. I abandoned the cart and sat in my car for almost an hour. No one prepares you for the quiet ways trauma shows up. It doesn't always look like screaming or sobbing into a pillow. Sometimes it's silence. An inability to choose between two brands of seltzer because your body's too exhausted from being in fight mode for weeks. Sometimes it's forgetting how to talk to people because you're terrified they'll ask how your parents are doing, and you'll either have to lie or unravel in front of someone who just wanted to grab lunch. My therapist said it was grief. I kept pushing back against that. They're not dead, I told her. No, she said gently, but the version of them you hoped existed, is. That sat in my chest like a brick. Because I had hoped. Even after everything, after the coldness, the favoritism, the constant minimizing, I had still believed that deep down, maybe they cared in the way I needed them to. I used to think if I worked hard enough, succeeded enough, proved myself enough, they'd see me. But they didn't. And the hardest part was realizing that maybe, they never had. The settlement conference happened 2 weeks later. By then, their lawyer had all but admitted there was no strong defense. The store surveillance, the purchase logs, and the returned merchandise attempt had sealed it. They wanted to avoid a full trial. Celia and I went over every point of negotiation in advance. I told her what I wanted: full repayment of the $19,000. A notarized written admission of guilt, not just a "we regret the misunderstanding" BS letter. No further contact from either of them, ever. No apology over brunch. No "let's talk it out." Just closure. She nodded. You understand this isn't how most people handle family theft cases, right? I'm not most people, I said. What surprised me was how quickly they agreed to everything. Almost like they wanted it done, too. Like they were ready to pretend it never happened. That, in itself, was painful in a weird way. They didn't even fight. Not to defend me. Not to fix it. Just to move on. They signed the letter. The money was wired in full to my account. I read the statement once, then folded it away. It was clinical. Dry. Just a list of facts with 2 familiar signatures at the bottom. But it was real. I could have them arrested still, if I wanted to escalate. The DA had enough to pursue charges. But I didn't. Not because I wanted to protect them, but because I didn't want them in my life 1 second longer than they needed to be. They were toxic, sure. But now they were also done. The silence that followed was its own kind of strange. You know how some people fantasize about cutting off toxic family members, and they imagine this glorious peace afterward? I didn't feel that. At least, not right away. What I felt was space. Space so big it echoed. It made holidays awkward. It made mutual acquaintances avoid me like I had a disease. Friends of the family, neighbors, old high school parents, people I hadn't seen in years, reached out with concern that felt more like nosiness. One of them messaged me, "You know, family's all you really have at the end of the day. It's not too late to forgive." I blocked her. I stopped trying to explain. Most people weren't equipped to understand the kind of betrayal that doesn't come with bruises or restraining orders, but still takes years off your life. People like simple stories: good kid, bad family, clean break. This wasn't clean. It was messy. Complicated. Like the time Savannah borrowed my laptop in college and then left it on a bus in another state. Like the way Darlene used to introduce me as our practical daughter at parties, like I was a dishwasher. Like the way my dad always seemed more embarrassed by my emotions than by Savannah's DUIs. This was years of little cuts that finally added up to a hemorrhage. Months passed. Life didn't magically become peaceful, but it grew quieter. The kind of quiet where you can hear yourself think again. I was still in therapy. Still healing. Still occasionally jolted by memories of Darlene's voice in that sax footage, Savannah's sneer when I confronted them, the heavy silence from Paul when I asked how they could do it. But I was no longer waiting for those memories to sting. Now I was watching them dissolve. I'd started saying no more often. To extra work. To people who drained me. I spent a little more money on myself, not to be flashy, but to reclaim something. I went on a solo trip to Asheville and spent 3 slow, quiet days hiking, eating at places without checking Yelp, and drinking hot coffee with nobody interrupting me to ask for a quick favor. And that's when something interesting happened. The fallout reached them. A woman named Melina, who'd gone to high school with Savannah and now ran a boutique PR firm in Richmond, reached out to me. Very casual tone, clearly trying not to be nosy. She'd been approached by Savannah for a job, social media and branding stuff. Melina had done her due diligence and Googled her. She stumbled across a summary of the legal case online. It wasn't a tabloid or anything, just a public record attached to a financial crimes newsletter that some local law firms subscribed to. She wanted to confirm that the Savannah, last name, involved in the card fraud case was, in fact, my sister. I didn't embellish. I didn't vent. I just told the truth. Yes, I said. That's her. I didn't ask what happened next, but a week later Savannah posted a vague Instagram story about people not wanting to see you win. Another week, and her profile was deleted entirely. Karma didn't come all at once. It came in soft, slow waves. More pieces fell into place. A mutual acquaintance mentioned that Paul and Darlene had put their house on the market. Apparently they'd had to refinance to repay some other debts, ones the legal fees and settlement with me had made harder to manage. They'd become pariahs in their church group once word quietly spread about what they'd done. No one confronted them. Just fewer invitations. More distance. Social exile, the suburban kind. They were used to being admired. Respected. Now they were just ordinary people who stole from their own daughter and got caught. It wasn't jail. It wasn't flames or fire. But it was justice. The kind that sticks. One day, I received a thick envelope in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. My mother's. I debated whether to open it. In the end, I did. Inside was a letter, 3 pages long. She didn't apologize. Not really. She explained. She rationalized. She made herself sound like someone trying to help her struggling child by giving Savannah a leg up. She ended the letter with, "I hope someday you can find it in your heart to forgive us. After all, we are family." I folded the pages neatly and slid them back into the envelope. Then I drove to the UPS store and had it shipped to Celia, my lawyer, for the records. That was the last time I acknowledged them. The revenge, in the end, wasn't fire and fury. It was cold boundaries. It was legal paperwork. It was receipts and strategy and discipline. It was watching their carefully curated image unravel quietly while I rebuilt my life brick by brick. The revenge was freedom. It was the day I checked my credit report and saw everything was clean, intact, protected. It was getting a birthday card from a coworker that meant more than 20 years of forced family dinners. It was falling asleep without bracing for impact. It was no longer being their backup plan. It was peace. Real, earned, ordinary peace. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. My parents stole my credit card and went on a $19,000 shopping spree for my sister while I was recovering from surgery. They mocked me when I confronted them. I sued them, won, cut all contact, and let the consequences roll in. They lost money, social standing, and their golden child's reputation took a hit. I got my freedom, and no longer feel the need to explain myself.